John McDonnell. His Hayes and Harlington constituency includes Heathrow. Thank you for joining us, Mr. McDonnell. Your reaction to this Supreme Court ruling?
Disappointed, but I actually think it's most probably irrelevant now because the government's own target has moved on from early in the year. If you remember, the target was 2050 to achieve zero carbon emissions, net zero. They're now saying 68% carbon emission reduction by 2030. So actually, there's no way they'd be able to meet that target if they let the third runway go ahead. So I think what will happen now, there may well be further legal challenges against this decision. I actually think the government now is in a position where it will rule out the third runway. And remember, Boris Johnson, he has his next door constituency to me, he opposes the third runway. In fact, he promised me and his constituency he'd lie down in front of the bulldozers if they tried to push it ahead. So I actually think I regret the court decision today. But I think actually it's becoming almost irrelevant now. Things have moved on with regard to the political attitude toward tackling climate change.
So you dismiss that, what we've just heard, that statement from the Heathrow airport saying that they are moving towards net zero, even with this new airport, in terms of carbon emissions?
Well, unfortunately, I've heard that so many times before about their ambitions, and I'm sorry, they've lost credibility on this. The government's own climate change committee has made it very clear you couldn't have airport expansion in this way if you were going to meet the targets. And remember, the government, and I've welcomed this, the government has tightened the targets. I don't think they've gone far enough, but they have tightened the targets over the last few months. And so I think, as I say, the third runway now is looking like a white elephant. I'd rather Heathrow Airport. Look, I support the airport. I want them to just make Heathrow better rather than bigger. And in that way, they can make their contribution towards the economy. But to actually threaten the homes of, you remember, Adam, it's up to 10,000 of my constituents would either lose their homes through demolition or have them rendered unlivable because of air pollution and noise pollution. But apart from that, this issue of climate change now overrides everything. Every decision in government now realistically has to take sustainability at its heart. And we're talking about the future of our planet. And as I say, the government has changed the targets and moved it on. They're much tighter now. So I think Heathrow has to come to terms with reality now and concentrate on making sure that Heathrow itself is more efficient, more effective, and gets onto a proper green agenda rather than futilely wasting resources and energy on this expansion.
Well, I mean, at the same time, Heathrow has, we know, been clobbered by the COVID outbreak. It's gone into loss. Many of your constituents work at Heathrow. Yeah. Wouldn't going for a third runway bring jobs, prosperity, and actually improve the infrastructure?
Well, it's interesting about that because every time, like on the fifth terminal expansion, we were promised more jobs. In fact, we didn't. What happened? There was increased mechanisation and we got less. The issue for us actually is let's do something that's realistic now. It's not realistic anymore to plan for a third runway because we know it's unsustainable given our climate change targets. So let's stop wasting our time on that and let's concentrate on making sure Heathrow itself is working effectively. And by that, I mean sitting down with the trade unions, with the local community, developing an environmental plan for the airport that's realistic. And I tell you also as well, I think it's a bit of a cheek Heathrow Limited at the moment to be talking about jobs when my constituents are actually on strike because Heathrow Limited are cutting their wages, undermining their conditions of work, using the pandemic as an excuse to do that. I think that's appalling. I'd rather they made sure that they sat down with the unions and with the local community and planned effectively. Let's work together on this rather than these pipe dreams about a third runway. Its time is gone. It's a white elephant.